Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we are delighted to be joined by Tushar Sharma, CEO and founder of Vivifi Medical. Tushar, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you. We were just talking about before we came on about, I think it's a year since you were with us for the 200K final, which is coming around very soon. So delighted to have you on the show and to share with the audience your story and the mission of Vivifi Medical. And of course, when we start the conversation, we'd like to frame it for the audience by saying, what is the big problem that Vivifi Medical is looking to solve?
Yeah, so we are aiming at benign prostate hyperplasia, which is the benign enlargement of the prostate. It's one of those conditions that all men will eventually get it. It's not a question of if, but a matter of when. And when that does happen, the prostate enlarges significantly in size, and right through the middle of the prostate runs the urethra through which men empty their bladder. And when it enlarges in size, the urethra starts to impinge because of this growing mass of prostate around it. And as a result, men cannot empty their bladder in a single go. And this forces them to wake up multiple times in the night just to force empty their bladder. This condition takes a severe toll on the quality of life of millions of men around the world, and is one of the leading causes for surgical intervention in men.
So enlarged prostate, it's a big problem. It's getting more attention, thankfully, quite rightly so, because as you say, it does affect all of us potentially at some stage. But also, I think you have other potential implications from this.
So in terms of the popularity of this procedure, King Charles recently came out and talked about benign prostate hyperplasia, and that drew a lot of attention for BPH. In addition to BPH as our beachhead market, the exact same procedure would also be applicable for patients of male infertility and also prostate cancer.
And so in terms of the current standard of care, like how would that be addressed? Like how would someone be tackling this in today's operation suite?
Yeah, so right now, majority of the BPH treatment, specifically the surgical treatments, focus on this anatomical constriction of the urethra. They try to open up the urethra, whether that's through mechanical means or through energy or through tissue resection. Those are the three main modalities in some form or the other, how they try to address this enlargement of the prostate and constriction of the urethra. Ours is a completely different approach. Ours is an androgen-based approach. So ours is attacking the hormone imbalance in the human body. So we do a vascular replumbing that redirects testosterone-rich blood away from the prostate, and therefore naturally reverses benign prostate hyperplasia over some time. And in addition to that, the benefit of our procedure would also be to increase systemic testosterone levels in these patients, which patients of BPH are typically low on testosterone, systemic testosterone levels, and are the prime consumer of testosterone replacement therapies.
Tushar, this is really interesting. Could you maybe even elaborate too on how your product or technology works? Like, what does that procedure look like?
Yeah, so it's a laparoscopic technology. So a couple of small, tiny incisions on the abdominal cavity. You stick in a couple of tools through those small incisions, navigate to the bottom of the peritoneal cavity sac around the internal inguinal ring. The spermatic vein, which is the primary drainage route for testicular venous blood, that also happens to be 50 to 100 times richer in testosterone concentration compared to serum level testosterone. You isolate the spermatic vein, it is very hard to miss it. It's usually present right around the internal, coming out from the internal inguinal ring along the peritoneal sac, and isolated and connected to a different blood vessel to instantly drain all of the testosterone-rich blood into systemic circulation.
Interesting. And now, how, I guess, are you going about your clinicals or animal studies today? Are you in those stages? Where are you at, I guess?
Yeah, so in order to best answer that question, taking a step back on our technology, there's two main components of our technology. One is the implant itself, which is sort of the stapling ring that actually stays behind once you connect the two blood vessels together. And that implant is already FDA approved and available off of the shelf. It is specifically designed for venous anastomosis and has excellent clinical data available for specifically those purposes. Now, our technology is essentially creating a delivery mechanism and device around that implant and delivering this through a small incision. People do the venous anastomosis using that predicate device and the same implant open surgically right now, and it is done on a very regular basis, but nobody really uses it for a laparoscopic procedure. And we are converting this open surgical procedure to a minimally invasive form by creating this delivery mechanism around the implant. And so in terms of our clinicals, there's two aspects to our clinicals. One is the procedure itself, the vascular replumbing procedure, for which we are pursuing OUS clinical studies starting in first half of this year. Very limited number of patients, an early stage study, just a proof of concept to demonstrate in patients of BPH. And then subsequent to that, we are aiming for another OUS clinical study to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of our device, also through a very initial limited number of patient cohort.
And what do you think it is about, what's going to allow you really to do this minimally invasive procedure effectively?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great question. So we have studied the open surgical procedure very extensively and identified some of the key challenges as we try to convert this open surgical vascular anastomosis to a minimally invasive vascular anastomosis. Now, there's only one way right now to do a venous anastomosis through a small incision. And by the way, we are talking about blood vessels smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter, so microvascular anastomosis, not really a typical like a renal implant, which is typically like a centimeter in diameter, right? So very fine precision and skill set needed by the surgeon over there. And right now, there's only one way to do this procedure, is to take a Da Vinci and suture those two blood vessels together, which, as you can imagine, requires high skill set, dexterity,
Mhm.
time, and also expensive. And so we are removing all of these technical barriers from performing this challenging procedure. And instead of doing a suturing procedure of two blood vessels, we are converting it to a stapler-like procedure. So essentially stapling connection of two blood vessels and removing the bulk of time required and also the technical complexity required to connect these two blood vessels together.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Kat.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, it's just the words when you said there were ringing in my mind. The technical complexity of a procedure like this. I'm thinking, you laid out a clear go-to-market strategy talking about how you're taking this forward, but at the same time, it's clear that you're working collaboratively with people to develop something as complex as this. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've sort of developed this process in hand with physicians.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work very closely with physicians. Our collaborators include a wide variety of surgeons, including urologists, vascular surgeons, cardiothoracic surgeons, plastic surgeons, um, and laparoscopy experts. So, and also robotic surgeons as well, laparoscopic robotic, same category. So yeah, so we work very closely with all of these physicians in terms of all aspects of not just the procedure development, but also the device development. With every single prototype or feature that we have, we rope them in to get their feedback and advice as to like, hey, what do you think about this particular aspect of the device? Does this make the entire procedure and the use of device easier, or does it make harder, or you don't care about this aspect? And so we are in this constant iterative and feedback loop with the physicians to improve on our technology and the procedure.
That's great to hear. I mean, we talk a lot about customer discovery, but I think in terms of that product development phase that you're going through, the human factors and getting that firsthand experiential loop that feeds back into your development is so critical. So, the next stage for you going forward, what does that look like? What's the sort of the most important thing that you're focusing on currently?
Yeah, so a bunch of stuff going on. So there's aspects of the device that we're focusing on. There's steps involved in the complete vascular anastomosis are multifold, and we have figured out the technical features that we need to incorporate for addressing some of those steps. And now we are working our way through the rest of the steps. So certain features of the device, and for confidentiality reasons, I cannot disclose what those features are, but we are working towards making this as easy of a procedure to be performed by urologist, or for that matter, any surgeon who is skilled enough to do a laparoscopic or a robotic procedure and has no idea about or no experience in vascular anastomosis.
Very cool. I love the fact this could be so transformative, going from open surgery to something on that level of minimally invasive could be so amazing for the patient's perspective. I'm wondering, Kyle, as we think about this, there's obviously a regulatory pathway that needs to be navigated through this.
Yeah, and Tushar, you mentioned too that you were, looking to begin some in human clinical studies at the end of this year. So, I guess if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about the regulatory pathway and how those, how you're going to go about these studies here, and it would just be interesting to better understand.
Yeah, so great question. So ours is a unique regulatory pathway. It is a 510(k) pathway for the technology, followed by a de novo for the procedure or the indication. So giving a little bit more background context over there. So our technology, the open surgical predicate device is a 510(k) tool, and we are converting it sort of into a laparoscopic approach. So we anticipate that since we are using the same implants, we can get a 510(k) pathway for the device. Now, the indication for use for that would be vascular anastomosis. So that's our initial step towards regulatory clearance. Once we have that, we will pursue pivotal studies for patients of BPH to expand the indication of use for BPH. So that's the de novo pathway where we have to do 100 to 200 BPH patients to be able to get that marketing claim.
Okay, so will the 510(k) then allow you to guess get to market one way or another and start generating some revenue to then support your de novo efforts?
No, it won't.
Oh.
So it will not make any difference because there are no CPT codes right now
Mm,
for which we can sell this device or sell this procedure for.
okay.
However, it does a couple of things. One is when we actually go to get the de novo indication for BPH, right, we could also simultaneously pursue a vascular anastomosis indication as the 510(k). However, pursuing that together will make the whole procedure a little bit complex, and it is just better to stagger them from each other, just because to avoid the simultaneous review committees, the vascular anastomosis will go to cardiovascular devices review group, and the urology one will go to the urology review group. So staggering them is a better idea, because once we do get a reimbursement code, then we can actually go and do male infertility and prostate cancer without having to need approval for all of those indications, right? So off-label, obviously, but yeah, so staggering them is a better approach, and that is one of the main reason why we want to pursue vascular anastomosis as a 510(k) first, and then a de novo for BPH.
Okay, interesting. And are you getting any feedback currently from any doctor, surgeon, physician at this stage of your technology?
On the regulatory strategy?
Well, yeah, I guess and how the product is maybe performing. Were there any kind of animal studies or anything that you've done maybe prior to the upcoming in-human clinical studies that you're going to be doing and are you were the surgeons and doctors that are going to be using your product and technology, were they involved in, I guess, what's their feedback been?
Yeah, so everybody's super excited about the technology and also the procedure in general. So we have done some benchtop testing of our devices, and we have shown through open surgical live acute animal studies that you can do this as a proof of concept. The vascular anastomosis can be successfully done. So we are refining those features to make it a fully laparoscopic procedure. And then in addition to that, on the vascular aspect of it, or on the BPH aspect of our procedure, we have done a couple of dog studies where we screened dogs that had spontaneous BPH, old dogs that had spontaneous BPH, and we performed a procedure, and we saw a rapid atrophy of prostate volume of about 50% in a span of 3 months. And then also in rat studies, we have a couple of really encouraging, promising rat studies where we have been successfully being the first group to induce BPH in rats completely through our procedure.
It's really interesting. I mean, is there a potential application or commercial avenue for you in a veterinary space that you've looked at or not? If you have that sort of success already within a dog application, for example.
In veterinary phase? Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. There is a potential market over there, but it is unfortunately not for our device, because most of the veterinary procedures will be done open surgically, not laparoscopically. So there might be a potential market for the predicate open surgical device, but we definitely don't necessarily want to market that.
Yeah, again, I think the complexity was one challenge we spoke about earlier on. But obviously you also mentioned that reimbursement potential challenge about, is this a brand new code that you're having to have created for this procedure? Is that the idea?
Yes, so this will have its own brand new code that we have to obtain.
And have you mapped out what that looks like in terms of a timeline, or is that sort of something that's a work in process?
So yes, so we are working with a reimbursement consultant who is a urologist by training and had been a practicing, just recently retired urologist, and has been on the AUA's coding and CPD committee as a chairman for a couple of years and on panels. And he is very well experienced in bringing multiple devices and getting new codes for those upon commercialization. And so our reimbursement strategy as of now looks like we would like to get a category 3 CPD code along with the category B approval for our technology as soon as we get that OUS clinical data out. So limited number of patients that will still allow us to get the category 3. And once we enter our pivotal studies, we'll work on getting the significant data to convert that category 3 code into a category 1 code.
So a pretty technical and challenging pathway, but potentially with a lot of benefits in terms of you creating your own real space and niche that's quite well protected with the de novo application, but also your own unique code as well, which is quite exciting. How are you getting feedback from investors in terms of you're going to need to raise, I'm sure, some capital along the way? What's their feedback been like on this?
It's been great, to be honest. I feel very fortunate and very grateful that even in the tough economic climate, we've been doing fairly decent. And maybe part of that is the unique value proposition that we really bring to the table for all the stakeholders that are involved in this in this procedure. So for investors, BPH is a very lucrative field with several high value exits in the last couple of years. So there's already a good precedent set for a good exit. And that's primarily because the number of patients for BPH, it's a huge patient population and rapidly aging population contributes to that growing market. For the next 3 years, more than 11,000 people will be turning 65 every single day for the next 3 years. So it's a massively rapidly expanding patient population. And then for the payers, we will save a lot of cost in lower complication rates, low recurrence rates, and just the testosterone replacement therapy right now is more than $3 billion per year expense to the healthcare. And I'm talking about only the direct cost. And then ultimately for physicians and for patients, for physicians, this is going to be a low-hanging fruit in terms of a lower learning curve with potentially good, attractive reimbursement rates if this works out. And then also for patients, they don't have to suffer the complications and the side effects of the current treatment options, which can be really, really horrible and life devastating. And they get the benefits of all the current treatment options using our procedure and then some more, but none of these side effects.
So, Callie, it sounds like we've got a growing market here. Tushar's got a great solution to fit with that growing market. And I know we've touched on a few of the things upcoming, but it sounds like there's some really interesting value inflection points on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot going on, Tushar, and I'm thinking about now the next 6 to 18 months. What does that look like for you, and what are the key milestones that you're looking to achieve?
Right. So our clinical studies is definitely on the top of our list in terms of the inflection point and milestones we're looking in the next 18 months. And also that includes getting our technology to sort of a initial generation one design freeze before we do the clinical studies and then move on to doing the second generation of our technology. So that's the biggest milestone that we are targeting.
Okay. And are there other kind of partnership opportunities that you might be looking at, or figure out to the robotic side of the technology? That's what I'm really interested to, and I'd like to touch on. So I get, how does that align to with what you're working on?
Yeah, so our technology would be potentially very attractive to any strategic who is operating in the field of robotic surgery. We think that ultimately robotics is the home for our product and our technology, at least in the US. Maybe outside of US, where in third world countries where laparoscopy is still the standard of care for minimal invasive treatments, our technology might find a straight transplant over there. But for the US, eventually long-term market strategy would be for robotics. So any strategic that operates in the field of as a robotic platform or is in the space of urology, and if there's a combination of two, that's even better.
So we've covered quite a lot here. I think for the audience, again, it's super exciting that you've identified this clear problem again, around the enlarged prostate, which, as I said earlier, it's getting quite rightly more attention. And you've maintained, by the sense of it, quite a high level expert team. You've got a lean model there. If you were thinking about that next key hire, who do you kind of think about you'd love to build into your team next?
Great question. So we are working towards our quality systems now. It's not officially, we are still officially in pre-design control stage, but we are gearing up to get to that stage where we want to start implementing some of the quality system aspects. And so specifically, we are looking for a design quality engineer and then another part-time marketing person. And also, just to put it out there, we are also looking specifically to begin with in the area of Oregon, and I can dive into those details if needed.
So opportunities, a growing team, that's always exciting to hear. I think, given the climate we've been in terms of venture funding, it's been challenging for all startups. So I think hearing about that expansion is exciting. And I'm sure, Kyle, that, Tushar has been picking up a lot through this journey.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, we always love to kind of reflect on that journey. And Tushar, it'd be great to hear kind of, what some advice you have for the audience, right? What are kind of like maybe a couple tips that you would have for other folks, other founders of medical technologies that are bringing, complex, innovative technologies to market? What's that advice you might have for them?
Yep. So, as a first-time CEO and a technical founder, I'll share some of my insights. The top insight that I found very interesting was that nobody cares about your technology, except for the physicians who are going to use it, right? Ultimately, what everybody cares about is whether this is going to make them money, whether this is going to actually help them out, do an existing procedure easier or faster, or save them money. And is this going to work or not? It's a binary decision or a question when it comes around the technology. But what they really care others is the economics aspect of the whole solution. So really understanding who your key stakeholders are and what are they looking for from the procedure or the solution that you have to offer to them, and communicating that and articulating really well what is the value proposition and how your solution will fit an existing gap that they can see in the market. That has been phenomenally huge learning through my journey.
I
I
think
think
that
that's great
exactly.
advice.
I think it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a couple of things to take from that. I mean, you said about how, nobody's interested in your technology, but clearly you persuaded people to be interested. So I want to touch on that in a second. But also you mentioned health economics. People have to think about this from day one. You got to make that commercial, that business model stack up. So I think understanding that as early as possible is so important. So I think that's great advice. But again, you've clearly been able to inspire people and get people behind what you're trying to do. So, what is that big vision? What are you thinking the company could be in 3-5 years time?
Well, in 3 to 5 years' time, we anticipate that we will be in our pivotal studies and are potentially on the path to commercialization. But longer than that, I'm super excited about what we're building over here at Vivify. We envision a world where majority of the prostatic and uterus-related conditions in the future will not be treated through an invasive tissue resection based approach, that it will be treated by treating the root cause, which is this hormone imbalance in the body. And so I feel that it is going to pivot at a certain point of time towards a vascular treatment procedure. Because it has a lot of value benefits to provide to the patients and avoid all of the horrible side effects that the patients have to experience right now.
That is huge, quite
Yeah.
literally. And obviously, when we're talking in terms of enlarged prostate, this opportunity here to provide a much better procedure, a much better experience for the patient. I think whether you're a royal family like King Charles, you mentioned earlier, who's experienced this, or again, for the likelihood that a lot of men may well experience this in future. Kyle, this has been super exciting hearing about the vision and all the things that Tushar has touched on.
Yeah, Tushar, this really is incredible and remarkable. And I love your approach. And I'm sure many people out there listening are really intrigued and fascinated and inspired by your story. And, they might want to get in touch with you because they might want to work with you. They might want to be that marketing person. They might want to be someone else, right? But how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
I'm super easy to find, whether on LinkedIn or through our website, vivifymedical.com. It's with 3 I's and no Y, Vivify. Or you could also just directly email us at info@vivifymedical.com.
Perfect. Easy enough.
Nice. Love it. Wow. Again, can't thank you enough, Tushar, for joining us today and sharing the mission and everything you're doing in this journey, and wishing you well, of course, with it.
Thank you so much. It was phenomenal, and thanks for having me over.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tushar. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Tushar Sharma, CEO and founder of Vivify Medical. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meaglejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.